Okay, welcome, gentlemen, Rabotai. We are up to module number 7. We are ready. We have called out for peace. Our enemy has rejected it, and it's time to go to war. So whenever we attack a city, before we had our amazing air force, we lay siege. And the Torah gives us halachot about how to do that. We'll discuss some of them today, namely whether or not, and we can do a full-blown siege or not. And another time we'll discuss some of the other halachot of siege, such as scorched earth tactics. That'll be its own module, small module, Bili Neder, one day in the future. For now, we have to discuss what are the halachot of general siege, because not only did it take place in antiquity, it took place essentially in Gaza, is taking place right now in Gaza, as well as other times in the history of Medinat Yisrael, and we should explore that today. So it all begins with a pasuk, right? Tzvi'u al Midian Parashat Matot, after the episodes with Benot Midian and Pinchas and Zimri and everything, and when it's time to go and take Nakom Nikmat Midyanim, to go into a war of Nekama against Midian, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends Moshe Rabbeinu to go and attack the Midyanim, and it describes the battle, the war that took place, Vayisbe'u al Midian. They went and they warred against Midian, Kasher Siva Adonai et Moshe, the way God commanded Moshe. Vayarigu kol zachar, and they killed all the males. And then Moshe Rabbeinu complained, how come we didn't kill the females? And they went back and they killed all those who were not bitulot. Now, what did Hashem tell Moshe about how to conduct this war? It's not really clear. So the Sifri says, one of the Midrashei Halacha, the Sifri writes, Sifri Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai writes, Vayisbu al Midian, Hikifuam Arba Ruchoteha, that they surrounded it on 4 sides. Arba Ruchoteha. Arba Ruchoteha. It's important to note. Arba Ruchoteha. 4 sides. Rabbi Natan Omer. Rabbi Natan says no. Natan lahem ruach revi'it kadei shivruchu. That they actually had the 4th side was free for them to run away. It was only 3 sides, not 4 sides that were surrounded. So this seems to be a machloket in the Sifri. What took place? The Tanna Kama, the first opinion, seems to say that they surrounded it on 4 sides. And Rabbi Natan actually says that they surrounded it on 3 sides. Now, the Rambam, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon in Hilchot Melachim, Perek Vav Halacha Zayin, takes the side of the one who says, this is a halacha that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, Mipi Hashemu'ah, halacha leMoshe miSinai, and they have to surround it on 3 sides. The Ramban, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Nachman, actually complains how come the Rambam did not include this in his Sefer HaMitzvot as one of the 613 mitzvot, and the Ramban thinks it should have been one of the 613 as well. Now, let's learn the Rambam together inside. Says the Rambam, Kishisarin al ir l'tovsah, when you are sieging a city to conquer it, to take it, Ein makifin ota mi'arba ruchotea. We don't surround it on all 4 sides, ela mishalosh ruchotea, only on 3. Umanichino makom laboreach l'chol mi sheyetze limaled al nafsho. Whoever wants to run away can flee for his life. Shneemar, our pasuk vayisbel Midian kashet siva Adonai et Moshe mipi Shemu'ah lamedu. We learn from Shemu'ah, from a halacha l'Moshe miSinai, a tradition that was the kashet siva Adonai Moshe shekach siva. This is what God told Moshe to do. The interesting thing is that the Rambam decidedly goes for the second opinion. Why is that so? What happened to the first opinion here, which seemingly would be the Rabbim, would be the majority? Why would the Rambam go for Rabbi Natan, who is the minority? So some resolutions are offered. Number 1, it's a machloket, and the Sifri is telling you what happened, with Midyan. Not necessarily the kashet tziva is literally what the mitzvah was, but similar to the mitzvah, perhaps. That's one interpretation. Another one, which is more reasonable, is that based on the Ramban in the Ramban in his additions to the Sefer Mitzvot, the Ramban actually cites the Sifri, quotes it differently. He quotes it with the word shalosha here instead of arba'ah. In which case, the Tanna Kama also says you have to stand only on 3, not 4 sides. And then Rabbi Natan is actually coming to explain why was the 4th side open. And that was because it was an escape route for people to run away. That would be more reasonable that the Rambam could potentially be paskening like the whole Sifri, not necessarily like one opinion over the other. That's the second approach. And there are others who claim that there are other sources, like the Netziv says in his in Emek HaSifri, that the Rambam was driven by other Mikorot to think that we paskin like this side as well. Regardless, this is a halacha on Moshe Misinai, a tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu. This has nothing to do with, the rabbis based on their experiences and history trying to make up halachot, takanot for the Jewish people, but rather telling us what the tradition was. Now, that was the view of the Rambam. I want you to join me in learning the Sefer HaChinuch as well to discuss some of the finer details of this halacha of not besieging on all four sides, because seemingly it would be asur when you go to war to besiege Gaza on all four sides. So we have to explain that. So let's learn the Sefer HaChinuch together. V'chein manichin ruach hachad be'ir masor. This is the mitzvah of war. The Sefer HaChinuch says, like, always have to leave one side open. Be'milchemet harishut, whenever it's an optional war, discretionary war. When it's a milchemet mitzvah, obviously not. Sheyivrechu misham, so people can run away. Ita b'sifri, like it says in the Sifri. We learn from the pasuk. Uv milchemet shiva amamim. But when it comes to the wars of the 7 nations, machifin ota mikol sa. But when it comes to wars in the 7 nations, you surround on all 4 sides. Mikol makom modim otam techila shim yitzon laniach hayir. Like the Rambam tells us about Yoshua and Navi, as we discussed earlier, that even when it comes to the 7 nations, you still have to inform them, call out to them for peace, and then they should flee and make peace. So whenever we become our vassals before we attack them. But once we attack them, we're going to kill them. We surround them on all 4 sides and we kill all of them. We don't really plan on doing this. So this is what the Chinuch says. I want to discuss 2 points. Number 1, what kind of war are we discussing here? So according to the Rambam, it seems that there is no distinction. It seems like all wars. Whereas according to the Ramban and his student, the Sefer HaChinuch, it would only be Milchemet Mitzvah, Harishut. But Milchemet Mitzvah, it wouldn't apply. In which case, it sounds like our case about Gaza would be a machluk between the Rambam and the Ramban. And there are those who try to explain the machloket between the Rambam and the Ramban based on the reason for the mitzvah. What is the reason for the mitzvah? Some say it's about a humanitarian corridor, an exit route. And we're not here to mercilessly butcher people. We're here to conquer the city. You can run away. You don't have to stay here, and we could always leave that door open for you. Whereas others say it's a strategic move, that we want to make sure that they don't feel like they're cornered and have nowhere to run, because then they'll fight better. We want them to always think in the back of their heads that they can run away, and then they can use that opportunity and not fight, and it'll make it easier for us to win the war. Nevertheless, the Ramban quotes both of these 2 opinions. So those who try to be tole one opinion on what the Ramban quotes both of these reasons. So those who try to say the Rambam holds like this one, the Ramban holds like that one, it's a little bit not compelling, because really the Ramban holds of both of them. Yes, he holds like one more than the other. I think the former rather than the latter. But ultimately, even if you want to say it depends on the reason, that's nice. But the Minchar Chinuch actually points out how we have to remember, Ta'amei mitzvot are for derosh l'kabel sachar, to understand the Ratzon Hashem. But they don't actually create halachot that were not prescribed to us yet already by the Chachamim and by Moshe Rabbeinu. And for that reason, it's nice to think about the reasons, but unless someone tells us explicitly that the reasons make a difference, the reasons are reasons and it's Torah, but it's not going to have any bearing on the halacha. So for that reason, we have to leave this activity at the stage of learning Torah, as it does not rise to the level of halachic relevance, as Hashem. So, but these are the basic mikorot, as we discussed, and I wanted to explore with you how this would play out in real life, in words of Israel. This Sefer HaChinuch and the Rambam that we saw in the Sifri. Just to review, we have our 2 two opinions here. There is another gears here, by the way, that says instead of natan lahem is ten lahem. It's more of a commandment. So it's not really telling us just a historical observation, but it could actually be telling us a halacha, that you should do this. And that's what God told Moshe to do. Which could be why we see this to be more poignant as a halachic statement and not just as a story. Otherwise, you could have said that Hashem said to do it in Midian and nowhere else. How do you know it's a mitzvah l'dorot? So then that would be relevant to us as well. So this was the Rambam, and we saw the Sefer HaChinuch. And now I want to go together to when this actually made a difference. And in Israeli history, that would be the first Lebanon War. Not to get too bogged down in the details, but once upon a time, Menachem Begin was the prime minister of Israel, and Ariel Sharon was the defense minister. Ariel Sharon was a decorated military hero, certainly a hothead who took orders and then went well beyond the orders in terms of what he did at war. Those who are not familiar should familiarize themselves with Israeli military history, as this course has been quite the golden opportunity for me to do, and I've enjoyed it so much, learning about the various wars and the ones we know about, but even the further details of the specific military antics and tactics and movements of our armies, our generals, our captains, on all the different fronts. And Ariel Sharon is certainly a superstar of many of those wars. So when Israel was under attack by the PLO, which is the Palestine Liberation Organization, which was led by Yasser Arafat, Shem Rishaim Yarkav, who was created a stronghold for himself in this port city of Beirut, way up north on the Lebanese coast of the Mediterranean, and what's his name? And Arafat was causing lots of trouble for many years in Israel, and there was general political turmoil in Lebanon. Multiple armed groups trying to run the show politically and militarily, and Israel decided that they have to invade Lebanon to just get a few kilometers up in order to create a safe buffer zone. And Ariel Sharon went way more than a few kilometers, and there was lots of political issues with whether that was a lie to the government, a lie to the world that Begin didn't tell everybody, or Ariel Sharon didn't tell Begin. It doesn't really matter for now. Bottom line is that in August of 1982, Sharon made it all the way up to the city of Beirut, and he besieged it in order to get rid of the PLO. Eventually, Reagan brokered a ceasefire that let what's his name let Arafat leave with 14,000 PLO soldiers, terrorists, whatever, to never come back. But of course they came back, but they went somewhere else and tried to kill us from there. So what happened with that siege? Was that permissible? Was that not permissible? In fact, it was a machloke between Rav Shlomo Yisraeli, Rav Shaul Yisraeli, and Rav Shlomo Goren. So as we said, Rav Yisraeli was Rosh Yeshivat Merkaz Harav, a Dayan in the Beit Din Rabbani Gadol, and eventually became the Nasi of Eretz Chemda. He was the author of Mishpatei Shaul, but in fact, here he's wrote his article in his other sefer, Chavot Binyamin. Rav Goren was the chief rabbi of the army. He was the chief rabbi of Israel at this time, and he was the liberator of the Kotel, and he was certainly a very, very army pro person. And oddly enough, you'll see that the machloket was a little bit strange. Rav Goren always thought a little bit outside of the box. Rav Goren argued that certainly this halacha applies in Beirut as well, and it is asur to besiege on all four sides. What about the chinuch, about Milchemet HaReshut, and the Rambam? He says, oh, no. This applies even to Milchemet Mitzvah as well, because look, Milchemet Midyan was a mitzvah, and it applied there. Hashem told them to go to war. Hashem told them to kill the Midyanim, and they still weren't allowed to do it, so clearly it is a Milchemet Mitzvah, and it applies there as well. You might tell me that the Ramban disagrees. Well, no. The Ramban will tell you even Milchemet Mitzvah outside of Eretz Yisrael counts as a Milchemet HaReshut. Remember, they weren't going to conquer HaChezbollah, the PLO. You could have argued that the PLO was not an existential threat at the time that the Milchemet Shlomo Galil, the first Lebanon War, was really coming to assuage, to stop. It was just trying to stop rocket fire. Maybe that's only Milchemet HaReshut, not Milchemet Mitzvah. Plus, maybe this halacha only applies when we have a Beit HaMikdash and everything as well. And if you remember, the Sefer HaChinuch did say that it applies by Milchemet HaReshut, but not by the Milchama of the seven nations. The seven nations are different. There it's Lo Techaye Kol Neshama. You can't extrapolate from there to all of the Milchemet mitzvahs. It's only that one, not the other ones. That's the basics of Rav Goren's claims. There's also a Meshech Chachma and lots of diukim. It's not for now. But Rav Goren felt that this is the halacha and we have to follow it. Rav Yisraeli wrote a letter to Rav Goren. After he published this, Rav Goren published his view in the newspaper. Rav Yisraeli wrote a letter to Rav Goren, to which Rav Goren responded by publishing it anonymously without mentioning Rav Yisraeli's name in the newspaper. And then he responded with his own notes, his responses to the letter. Rav Yisraeli then followed up with a teshuvah that he published in Techumin and a newspaper, I forgot which one. And eventually in his Sefer, Chavot Binyamin Chelik Aleph, where he says that, what are you talking about? Milchemet Midian was special, it was revenge. They didn't kill all the men in there either. There was different rules. It was a milchama of nechama. It wasn't a milchama of killing that we had to, it doesn't really matter. Also, the fact that it's not even counted as a mitzvah would indicate to you that this is more military advice about how to win a war than a mitzvah that has to always be done. And it depends on the situation. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And by the way, Rav Goren, if you're going to tell me this is a milchamet harishut, and need a bit hamikdash, and it's not a milchamet mitzvah, so then good morning. How are you ever allowed to go to war? You're missing a Sanhedrin. Milchamet mitzvah, the melech can go to war without consulting the Sanhedrin. Milchamet mitzvah, the melech can go to war without consulting the Sanhedrin. But not by milchamet harishut. So how is this war even happening? Plus, you'll tell me the Shiva Amimin. There are the Diukim, you can make it the other way also in the Chinuch and in the Rambam. Both Rav Goren and the Rambam think that both Rav Goren and Rav Yisraeli think that the Ramban and Rambam will agree with everything that they're saying. And if you read their Teshuvah, they try to become totally unequivocal, pluralistic, that everybody's on their side. They're trying to be singular, not pluralistic, that everybody's on their side to give you that impression. And Rav Yisraeli even has a line that's Tamua ma'od, what Rav Goren writes. And Rav Goren responded saying, Tamua doesn't matter, it's emet la'amito. This is the truth. Each one believed he was honestly telling you intellectually what he thought the truth to be in halacha. Rav Goren starts his teshuvah by telling you all the standard stuff about milchamet hamitzvah and milchamet rishut, whatever. And he says, I would like to believe that, but I don't believe that. I have a different view. And he tells you his view. So it's important to know each one believed that you should let the non-combatants be able to escape. The question is only about leaving the door wide open for terrorists to leave. There can be a siege on four sides in a sense that terrorists, and then anyone who's not involved can leave Beirut. But people who are terrorists, who are fighters for the PLO, Rav Goren said should be allowed to leave, and Rav Yisraeli said no way. And Rav Yisraeli pointed out how just like we have a mitzvah to call out for peace when it's milchamet harishut, and then we initiate a war, the same thing goes for the fourth side. At that point, once we're initiating that war, then we can't besiege on all four sides because we started this war. But when someone starts a war against us, they initiated it on us. We're just defending ourselves. We don't have to start trying to call out for peace. We don't have to start trying to not engage in siege on all four sides. We do whatever it takes to win the war. It doesn't matter at that point. Rav Goren disagreed. He tried to bifurcate between these two ideas. Rav Yisraeli rather keep them together. Lema'aseh, the IDF followed Rav Goren and they left two escape routes open because they didn't want an all-out war. And, history is a little bit funny in that when Arafat left, eventually a year or so later, he was back in Tripoli in Lebanon, which is also a port city, except this time he was besieged not just by the Jews, but by his own people. The defectors and former commanders of the PLO, who were much more radical and extreme than him, were upset with him, and they actually besieged him in the city of Tripoli. And then Am Yisrael, the Medina Yisrael, decided to get in on this, and they besieged on the fourth side. So Rabbi Brody points out in his book, it's odd that Rav Goren now was upset that we let go eventually of this siege. He thought that it was okay to do this siege because we didn't besiege on all four sides. The other four sides were by Arafat's own people, other people, so it was okay. Tried to distinguish between the two episodes in Beirut and in Tripoli, but that's not for now. Now, what about Gaza, which is now? People are complaining about the siege and starvation in Gaza, despite all of the hundreds of humanitarian aid trucks that make it into Gaza every single day, and under our on our burden that they get in there, and then they're just hijacked by Hamas and other militant groups, and that's our fault, of course. That aid is not getting to the right place. That's completely our fault. So, is it okay to besiege Gaza? Remember, Gaza is a densely populated place with over 1 million people in this little strip of area, and Israel wanted to invade it in October, November. What's the deal? Does this count as a siege? And then when we invaded, it didn't really go as like that. So I think that it's important to note that a siege sounds like, to me, we're going to enclose on you and not let you out. That's what a siege sounds like. Essentially what happened in Gaza is that we said, get out of the north because we're coming, and you can go to the south. And at no point did we ever close the evacuation route. Hamas did. Hamas wanted to block all the evacuation routes, like the Salah al-Din Road and the like. It's not really our fault necessarily. We're trying our best at all times in Gaza, which is surrounded, to not actually take over the whole place at once. In a sense, I don't think that's the same thing as a siege. There's a broader siege on Gaza, but on the specific city, there is no specific siege that completely excludes one from being able to run away. And the same thing with southern Gaza. They divided up into so many smaller parts, and were told in advance where to be, where not to be, to the point that there are hundreds of thousands of people living on the beach with humanitarian aid, and they're not being killed, and they can go there, and it's safe for them to be there, relatively speaking. So I don't think, now that we know the halachot, even Rav Goren would agree here. I think that even Rav Goren would agree here that there's no problem of besieging Gaza. It's not really a siege. So as much as we had a machloket once upon a time between Rav Goren and Rav Yisraeli, and there are halachot of siege. Number one, this is a milchamet mitzvah, so forget about the whole thing. This is obvious. It's a milchamet mitzvah. We didn't start this war. We don't want this war. That's number one. Number two, even if you hold like Rav Goren, I don't think it would apply here. I think there's a simple point to be made. Nevertheless, it's fascinating to explore this machloka between Rav Goren and Rav Yisraeli and see how each one read the Rambam and Ramban differently in the various Mikorot about the sources, as we saw in the Sifri, and the different ways to read the Sifri and the Rambam. I thought that was fascinating. And Be'ezat Hashem, we will return to the sugya of sieges soon enough when we learn this sugya of scorched earth tactics. Be'ezat Hashem, all the Torah learning should be a zechut for Am Yisrael's continued success in destroying our enemies and being Mekadesh Shem Shamayim. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.